If you're going into residential design, there's a path for you to learn from other people. If you're curious, if you're interested, you can learn the skills. And I think people who do that can be very successful.
So welcome to the podcast. Today we have Killy Scheer on with us. Welcome, Killy.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Excited to have you, Killy. So Killy is the principal and founder of Scheer Co. Interior Design, and we go way back to design camp. So this is a couple months now.
That's
That
right.
we've been connected,
Long
and
history.
yeah, our long history, and you're doing some amazing stuff. Not too far from design camp. I mean, it wasn't a huge commute for you, so
No, definitely not. I was right here in town. It was great.
it's awesome. And then you also connected me with Frank, right? So I think Frank and I will
Did.
be recording soon. So he's coming up a couple episodes after you. And so that was that connection as well. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear that one.
Yeah, it's going to be good. So maybe we start here. I mean, fortunately, Kelly, you and I were able to meet each other. We sat together dinner at design camp. And maybe for you, like I know you've been really successful in your career, and what you built with your interior design. What pushed you to kind of go to design camp and take that next step?
So I've been in the design industry for about 20 years, and
Mhm.
then had my own business for 10. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary, so that felt like a big milestone. Um, and always learning. I feel like, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but the going into the design because I love design versus going into owning a business and understanding what all comes with that. So I think the last 5 years or so is really where I woke up to, you know, I'm essentially a CEO and a leader, and I have to behave that way, and we need systems that reflect that, and processes, and operational rigor. And um, design camp came at a great time for me to just continue my learning. I love panels, I love podcasts, I love anytime there's an educational component to any type of design show I go to, furniture fair, what have you. But this was going to be a great condensed, intensive program that gave me an opportunity to really do a deep dive into the processes, and what are we doing right, which I learned we were doing a lot of things right, and then I learned that we have some things we need to improve on. So it was great. It was a wonderful. I felt like it was a perfect time for me to take this next step.
I think I don't want to say mature, but I think it's like fascinating because we align this way where, it, the business is tough, right? You're super creative. You have the talent of interior design, but then trying to run the business is totally different. I mean, the operational side is very different. And I know most of us builders struggle with that. You may be good at building, you may understand building and, flow and scheduling and everything else that goes into the building science of it. But running the business and cash flow and WIP and understanding taxes and
Yeah.
the financial side. I mean, there's just a lot of complexity, and there's not really a program. There's not really an educational way to teach how to run a business. I mean, even college, when I did college, and it didn't really cater me to be an
Same. I went to
entrepreneur.
college twice, and it.
I mean, it's interesting. You can take accounting classes and business classes, but I don't feel that there's ever anything that really, prepares you for the ins and outs of running your business, right? And hence the reason why it's great to have, the community that you have in design and design camp and these other avenues.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even with the design, I went to design school, and I have a master's in interior design, and it wasn't until I started working that I really, it took a few years of being on job sites and understanding how does a tile resolve into this floor or the wall, or into another tile, just making mistakes, and or seeing how somebody else handles things, and understand how you can draw it all day, but until you see it on site, it's a whole different ball game. And that's sort of the same with running a business. Like you said, I don't think you can learn concepts in school, but you can't,
Mhm.
those applied real life situations where you're out on the field, or you're in the office and you're dealing with an employee, or there's things that come up that you haven't had, there wasn't a textbook for it. So really kind of trudging through those. And if you didn't have, I worked for a lot of smaller firms. um, I of course had bosses or leaders, but they were kind of in the same position as me. I realized that they were design first, and business was sort of the thing we had to get through to make the money. But
Mhm.
I wouldn't say I had great examples of how to run a business. I got to see how not to do things, or how we could improve on things, or could I make this? Could I create a system out of nothing? But it really wasn't. I didn't come away with, okay, this is the structure, this is the system, this is my process. I had to really figure that out for myself, and I think that's probably the same for really any designers and architects, general contractors. We all have the different ball game once we start growing and scaling and running the actual business side of things.
And it's interesting you bring up the term scaling because it is true. I mean, you're super ambitious, Kelly. I mean, I could sense that, when we were sitting by each other at dinner. And um, as you scaled your business, I mean, it comes with a lot of complexity because now you're not at the forefront of every meeting. You're not involved in every aspect. And so you have to have this trust and empowerment with your team. And, for the scaling side, that process becomes really important. How has that changed over the years?
Well, it's still changing. um, I've had a really hard time stepping back. I've spent so much time in the business and not as much time on the business, and that's
Mhm.
been the last couple of years. Really, how do we put people in place so that they can have autonomy over the things that I used to oversee and control, and learning to trust people, and letting them. I don't ever want to. I guess you always have to fail in some way, but I don't want them to fail colossally. I don't want them to fail in front of a client. I don't want them to feel like they're on, completely on their own. Um, so there's this balance of being around, but being a step back and being there for support. I think that's been a huge challenge for me, because I've done it so long by myself, or in my own way, and explaining to somebody how would I handle the situation. There's culturally, like when a client calls or is upset or sends an email, how do we handle that? What words do we use? What tone do we have? We don't want to lose them. They're often right, even if they're a little misguided. We still have to make
Mhm.
them feel like they're being heard, and it's our job to make them feel comfortable and to maintain and earn and then retain that trust. So I think that's been really hard, but it's happening. I'm learning to let go a little.
I love that you're so like open about it, right? And I don't want to say vulnerable because I think anyone listening can totally relate, Kelly. I mean, for you, as you're kind of sharing that, it's like we've all been on that reciprocating side, of that, a recipient, I should say, of an email or a text or a phone call of someone that's frustrated, and whether it's expectations, whether it's lack of communication, whether it's whatever. I mean, there's so many variables that go into it, and it's really hard to always find the right answers to say. And it's one of those things that even as much as you network, engage experience from others, until you've gone through it and you understand protocol and, how you want to communicate that and work through that. I mean, there is definitely a practice to it, that takes time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, and you know, I remember there was one situation with a client years ago where I didn't handle it that well. I could have kind of sucked it up a little bit more, and I feel like I was trying to prove my point, and I thought my way was the right way, and it had to do with, it was a billing question, and I was actually being very transparent, and it turns out she didn't want to see all the nitty gritty. It seemed like nickel and diming, and that was a big
Mhm.
lesson in what do people need to see when we're billing them? Do they need to see every last dime, every last little cent, or can we collect some of it and just smooth out that process a little more so they don't see how all of the sausage is made? It's really not pretty. So, but I definitely didn't handle that as well as I could have, and I learned from that, and I think having someone else handle that for me though would have been, I'm okay with making my own mistakes, and I'll replay that over and over in my head for the next 10 years. I'm still talking about it. So, um, but I think that would have been really hard for me if we'd, lost that client or ruined that relationship if somebody else on my team had done it at that point. I think that would have been, I don't know if I ever would have gotten over it. But luckily it was just me. So
Yeah. Sometimes it's better when it's just you. So
yeah,
that way,
yeah.
you can just deal with it
Just take
internally.
responsibility for it. Yeah.
Yeah, the transparency is a really interesting topic because I run a cost plus model, and so there's always challenges, right? And one of the tough things is that when you're a builder and designer, you're essentially having open surgery, right, on the floor. I mean, clients have full access; they're seeing the project, they're seeing mistakes happen, they're seeing, for us, we may have a project and it's pretty nuanced. I mean, it's pretty understanding that hey, we're going to have the house drywall complete and paint, at some point, but at the end of the project, we're going to have to come back and do some drywall repairs and paint repairs. And, there's a lot of things that go into building because the house has never been built, and there's logistics and other things and other trades going in, and not everything is, perfect all the time, especially
Yeah.
per plan. And so as a builder, you understand that, hey, there's a cost associated with drywall or paint or final grading, right? Some of these kind of open-ended things. And it is tough because some clients are like, well, that's your mistake. If someone's walking through and that cabinet didn't fit perfect, like you need to eat that, like you need to fix that. And so it goes back to that communication where you're trying to be open with them. And now I've learned, okay, well, I highlight certain line items and I tell the client, look, our bid for drywall is 50,000, but we're going to carry 55. And the reason being is that there's going to be punch and there's going to be items that come up that's just inherent to construction. It's just part of the process. And it's not a mismanagement thing. It's just, this is what it takes to your point, Killy, where you're like, this is how the sausage is made.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one. It's hard to, and I think we're transparent also, in terms of, we're all humans. We always say that this isn't machinery. Everyone that's touching this house or whatever we're working on is it's human beings. People are going to mess up. Our role, one of many, is to find solutions and set expectations, communicate. I'm never going to lie to a client. I'm never going to tell them, something, just cloak something. I mean, there's things they don't need to know about. If we can fix it offsite or fix it, out of view, they don't know the difference. We don't need to stress them out with it. But if it's, if something needs to be redesigned, rethought, and we need their buy-in, of course, we're going to talk to them about it, and bring them in on it. But, never come to them with this scary, like, we don't know what happened, everything's a mess. It's always, here's what happened, here's how we're going to fix it, and kind of keep them, so they understand that, we're in control and we know what we're doing here. So we have their best interest in mind. And we can fix it. I mean, anything's really fixable with time and money. So it just depends
Yeah.
on, who's paying and how we're going to, how we're going to do that. And I think that's where collaboration and really teamwork comes in when it comes to, designers, architects, and general contractors. We always try and, let's just figure out a solution. Who cares who screwed it up right now? Like, how are we going to fix it? And then we can talk about it offline, figure out, what happened, who's going to pay for it, all of that stuff. But never, I can't stand the not playing nicely in the sandbox with all the other trades, and partners on the projects. I think, clients are paying too much money for us to be fighting in front of them and looking really unprofessional. So we always, we really work hard to partner with other teams that are kind of like-minded and want to work together, and we find solutions together. We come at all of our design solutions as a united front, and I find that everything goes so much smoother when we're not pointing fingers and, well, he said that and that was their fault, and this is not our job. Like, that language doesn't come into play for us.
Yeah, that's so important. And I love you brought in the collaboration between the team because I would imagine over the years you've probably had mixed experiences with different architects
Oh
and
yeah.
builders. So maybe we'll start with the easy one, the pro side. What are some of the good experiences? What made that relationship good between the communication and coordination, in those positive experiences.
Yeah, I mean, first, I think having a team assembled early from the get-go is so important. I know this is something you like to do in your business.
Mhm.
Having an architect, a designer, a general contractor, landscape, whoever's going to be doing anything, executing anything, bring them in early so we can all have a cohesive design intent and then a plan, communication plan, who's taking lead on the project. Sometimes if we're kind of assembling the team, we're kind of the full team lead. So that means, communication will come through us. We will assemble all notes. That doesn't, the general contractors always have their own systems and whatnot. But we include everyone in our communication so that everyone's on the same page. And I think it's, when we have not had that, it can get really messy and disjointed. So it's always it's been so much smoother when we can get people together early on. And then also, we have architects we've worked with for years. When we're working for the first time with a team, we like to run our designs through them first. We each have our meetings with the clients. But I don't ever want to design something that isn't as incongruous with what an architect has created. So we often will have we'll have a pre-design meeting so that we run through our presentation, or what, our what we're where we're headed, with the architect, to make sure that they're on board with it, or at least so they understand what we're doing, and they can make comments, and they can voice their opinion and say that, I love all this, but I don't like that. Can we rethink it? And I want to stay open, and they do that for us. And then with the general contractor, we've really been working hard to bring on GCs early, and use them as on a consultation basis, really, to guide the process, and whether both from like a budgetary standpoint, and I mean, not so much aesthetic, but just understanding, are we designing to the desired budget? Are we over designing? Can we do nicer things,
Mhm.
really understand, because the pricing fluctuates so much, we can't keep up with all of it. We can have general ideas of, per square
Mhm.
foot, but I don't know what wood's doing right now.
Mhm.
Oak is this, and walnut's that, and teak is crazy, but it changes daily. So it's really helpful to have a GC on board in an advisory role early on, and that's been very successful and really enjoyable.
I love that you do that because, in my experience, it's pretty rare that, um, I shouldn't say pretty rare, but to have the design and architect really coordinate that design drawing, right? Because so many times, one of our biggest struggles, is that, to your point, that there's these meetings with the client, you're kind of collaborating at the beginning, which is super important, and then you kind of take these two paths where architect is now working on engineering and civil and MP&E, and then you have the designer working on all the finishes, and then you kind of come together at the end as you submit for permit. But what happens is as these things have changed and morphed a little bit and decisions have been made, that there's not really a time when the architect takes your interior design drawings and updates the plans. I mean, I only know of a couple architects that'll do that. I mean, that's definitely kind of our emphasis, is hopefully we can get to the point where the architect's now taking the design drawings and implementing it. But I think even that worst case, to your point, that you're coordinating with the architect to say, hey, here's my new reflected ceiling plan. Here's our new cabinet layout. Here's, these items, to make sure that they are speaking the same language with the architect, and you're taking into consideration anything that could be possible with the project.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always difficult to, we have to figure that out up front, who's doing what, who's doing what drawings, how do we, how are we presenting our final set to a general contractor? Is it all going through the architect? Are we submitting, pages, sheets that can get incorporated, or are we using them as a drafter, which, no architect wants to be the drafter for the designers. So we make sure to do a very, very comprehensive drawings on our own, but we do figure out, okay, you guys are going to handle these things, and then we're doing millwork, we're doing, interior elevations, tile diagrams, all of that stuff. We figure out who's RCPs are tougher because there's architectural lighting and the decorative lighting, but switch plans, we also, those are complicated. We have to talk to the clients about that. I mean, everyone sort of all hands on deck when it comes to that stuff. And it sure makes it easier to do it all together. I mean, that's kind of like the lesson in business in general. Like, we can't just do this alone. And so it really helps to have this. It takes a village. It helps to
Mhm.
have everyone working together, and figuring it out early. Or if you have to change and shift, then we can do that. But those it takes a special team, I think, because not everyone wants to collaborate. Not everyone wants a designer on the project. Not everyone feels like that's a value add. So that can be an uphill battle sometimes, proving our value and what we are bringing to the table. That we're not just trying to slow the process down and complicate things. That we're trying to actually make it easier for everybody, but it doesn't come off that way all the time.
So it is tough. I mean, that, for you trying to provide value, which you do. I mean, I could speak to this all day, but, walk through that process as when you're in a position where you feel they have to sell the value, the difficulty in that, just for clients to understand everything you bring to the table.
Yeah, and I think it's not just clients. It's all the architects aren't
GCs
always
and
excited.
architects.
GCs are
Yeah.
not always excited. We have to convince a lot of people that we should be in the at the table. Yeah, I mean, I think, it's, first of all, I mean, when I think about like a large scale home, and I think about the clients making selections. I mean, from selections alone, there's drawings, and sure, architects can handle drawings, but from an interiors perspective, there is a limit, in terms of livability, and really, we're not just talking like plop a sofa here and the TV will go there. I mean, there's really layers and levels and all kinds of elements that have to be considered to make a house a home. But then from a selections standpoint alone, I don't know how anybody thinks they can do it. If they're, 4,000, 6,000, 20,000 square foot homes like you're doing bigger, that to not have a team that is experienced guiding that process and then documenting it all. I don't know how. I mean, I don't know what they would provide to a general contractor at the end of the day, if there wasn't, finished schedule. They're not used to this stuff. So,
Mhm.
we have very comprehensive, detailed finish schedules, and it takes a long time to put them together because every last bit of information, the size of a tile, the grout joint, what color it is, it's all there. Who to contact to get it, how much it's supposed to cost. That it's very comprehensive, and I don't know how anyone would do it as a homeowner without somebody to help that process. And thankfully for those larger home, like people just don't want to do that stuff on their own. It's not usually those clients that we need to convince. It's the ones that are, have a smaller project. And from the architect and general contractor side, I think is the just the photos alone, the end result always just turns out better. I mean, I'm not trying to toot our horns here as designers, but the projects look finished. They're warm, they're inviting. There's candles, there's flowers, there's, from a marketing perspective, it's so much easier to sell what you do when you have great photography, and that's how we're getting our next jobs.
Mhm.
People want to see that these are completed projects. It's high quality work, and you can't do that with you know, the crappy iPhone photos.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Kelly, it's interesting. I mean, you use the term luxury service, but at the end of the day, when a client's investing this amount of money into their project, to have something that you just feel different. You walk in, everything's in its place. You
Yeah.
mentioned the flowers and candles. I mean, that's a great touch for sure. But the furniture layout and how it all runs together and living in their home, and there's so much value to be at a point in life where you have this sanctuary at home, and you're living in it like it's comfortable, and it's and to your point that clients that do hire good designers, that hire good architects, right, and good builders, that they, a lot of them are concerned up front. Well, I shouldn't say a lot. Some are concerned, well, there's an investment, there's a cost, right, to this, but it always pays itself back in the end because, as you mentioned, the market material, when they resell, they always do much better, at least here in our market for sure.
Hmm.
Clients that have invested that, people walk in and they're like, I want this. Like they become emotionally attached because it's so well done and put together, especially when they're doing the full package, like furniture and design.
Right. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, there's and then there's the financial payback that you get, but then there's the kind of intangible, the feeling you get when you come home, the sense of pride you get. If you've been living with your college hand-me-downs for, most of your adult life, because I mean, people have real lives. They've got busy families, they've got kids, they've got pets. Maybe they didn't want to, change out the furniture for various reasons, sticky fingers, dirty paws, all that. But when they can get that upgrade, the sense of pride that comes with that, and not just, you're walking into your own home, and you kind of a fresh, breath of fresh air, and you really feel at home, and it feels like it reflects you. But then when your family comes over, your friends come over, the way people talk about your house, the way you feel when they're talking about your house, I mean, this is like, it's a reflection of these people living in the house. So there's few things. Our environments are so important to us for home, work. It doesn't matter. We're in these places the majority of our lives. So lighting matters, the sofa comfort matters, the dining chairs matter. How, do you want to have uncomfortable chairs and your guests are just sort of, wiggling around and trying to get out of there as soon as possible, or, really, really comfortable, like keep them sitting for a long time. And what are the experiences in the house, the different experiences that you have as a family, watching TV and hanging out versus entertaining and having, friends over for drinks. All of those things, we consider all that stuff. We walk through that with our clients, and tap into all of these different usages, which really makes it, a whole comprehensive, fully usable, but also very experiential home.
I think, along that line, you mentioned intangible, which I think is interesting because I know something that I use is that, for the client, like if you don't have a designer, then they're going to hate me by the end of this, right? And, the amount of stress and strain. And from my side, I've dealt with it where clients are like, well, I know what I want, and I know what I want to select. And, I have good taste, and which is all fine, right? Because some clients are probably have pretty good direction on, style and theme and whatever not. But I always follow up with, okay, well, what are the deliverables you're going to give me as the client? Like, I can understand this interpretation, and you know what you want, you can make decisions, but how does that now come into real life for me as a builder? How do I
Right.
build from that? And when there's a point of conflict, when there's a dispute, like, what is the documentation to, make sure I'm building it correctly, a set of plans? And so, I'll always pull out like a design book from one of our designers and say, are you providing me like this
Can you
CAD
do this?
detail?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or you give me this
It's
3-inch
50
binder.
pages.
Yeah. I have all these pages of, layouts and floor
Yeah.
plans and elevations and all the walls. And, when I go through that, and then they kind of, their eye opens, like that's where the value add changes, because they
Yeah.
see the amount of work. It's not just,
No,
hey,
it's
I'm
not
going
just
to,
picking pretty things and,
no,
flitting around in beautiful fabric, which I think is what, half the world thinks we're doing. It's 99% logistics and people management and problem solving and paper pushing.
yeah,
Yeah, math, a lot of math.
a lot of math. And to your point, I mean, here's another, point that probably a lot of designers don't even touch on that you do. I mean, you have an impressive background, Killy, like your education and knowledge and know-how, but understanding product itself, how's the client going to be living? Are we doing
Right. Yeah.
porcelain? Are we
Yeah.
doing marble? Like, what's the maintenance going to be like? And you mentioned how different tiles line up, and, a lot of tiles aren't the same thickness, and
Right.
so you
Yes,
have
you
to,
have to,
yeah,
yeah. They don't all the wood tile, the wood floor
yeah,
does not match
the
the
tile.
bathroom tile.
Yeah.
So how do we transition that? Yeah, no, there's lots of details, and I think people don't fully understand. I think they also don't understand that designers handle that stuff.
Hmm.
I think they probably think it also just falls onto the general contractor if they even think about it at all.
Hmm.
But yes, the different thicknesses and how things come together, how they wear. We put maintenance and care. We have a maintenance and care package that we send at the end of every project anyway. But along the way with our finish schedules, we have a link to, there's installation, but there's also how do we care for this? So up front, everyone knows that, this needs to be sealed. This is, you know, don't use this on a shower wall. Various some of the just guidelines so we don't get into trouble later, and we understand what all the limitations of the products are, or how we're going to use them, and if it's appropriate. A lot of research goes into that.
A lot of research, and I mean, you're in a pretty warm climate, right? And I'm in a warm climate, and even factoring in, hey, where's the windows at? How does
Hmm.
that can impact? If we have wood flooring, will that deteriorate? And as that sun comes in over the years, is it going to change? And I know even from a landscape design, we kind of look at where artificial turf is and windows, because the heat coming off the glass and
Yeah.
other parts, metal exteriors in our modern homes can really reflect onto that turf and
Oh yes, I've
create
I've
distortion.
seen some melted turf before.
Right?
It's
It's crazy.
fascinating.
Yeah, you bring in that plastic turf, and and you get some heat on there, and I mean, it's hot enough as it is, in Phoenix in the summer, and so,
Yeah.
there's just a lot of coordination. That's the value add that come, and it's hard when you're young in your career to really understand that, because you just don't know your business, you don't
Right.
understand your processes, and when you become more seasoned and savvy as you are, Kelly, it's like a little bit easier for you to, kind of walk through that.
Yeah. And there's just, I think that general wisdom comes with age too. You learn all the things that you don't know, and you realize how small you are in the universe, not to get too heady, but how much there really is to learn, and really not make any assumptions ever about anything, because there's so many there's so many ways things can go wrong. So covering all of the bases and doing as much research as you possibly can do to mitigate future problems.
Hmm. So going back to design camp, what were, being that you have a ton of experience and you've worked, had your company for 10 years, what were some of the big takeaways you had?
It was really helpful to hear how other people's design processes unfold. Some of the just how other designers plan out their projects, whether it's with schedules, but or internal workflow, kind of clean up their process. That's something we've spent a lot of time working on. How do we make this? Our goal has been our client experience, and it, building, designing, construction, it's not very pleasant a lot of times. So how can we control? And that's just, there's things we can control and there's things we can't control. So what can we get ahead of and set expectations on correctly ahead of time so that clients understand what to expect. So I think, Design Camp was great for that kind of insight into workflow and how, how our leaders and our guides were, run their businesses, but also then, the other campers. And I was in a group with other people who've also had their businesses for 10 years. So I feel like we learned a lot from each other. Um, the finances, I mean, I feel I got something out of every single small group, every keynote. It was, I have pages and pages and pages of notes, and had to do it. We've had a couple of downloads. So just really thinking about different ways of billing. That was another, that's always a question, like what is the best way to bill? There's always the question of hourly versus fee, fixed fees, combination of the two, product markups and margins. That's always a question, always a, concern. So just kind of understanding the ins and outs and pros and cons of the way we do it, the way other people do it. And is there some sort of happy medium legal? It's always eye opening to hear about what attorneys are hearing and
Mm-hmm.
where we should be terrified.
And where the economy's going. I mean, it's funny you say that because I think I'm in a Builder 20. In fact, after I was with you at Design Camp, I went to my builder meeting in
Hmm.
Kansas City, and um, it's one of the big things is understanding where's the market going. What is it
Yeah,
looking like, and then also litigation and tax codes are changing, right? How does it impact us as builders? And the reality is, at the end of the day, you're managing a ton of risk, and
yeah,
so you have to understand that, and that's the power of these networking events that we attend.
yeah.
From you, what about the networking side? So you go to like design camp as a designer, right? And you're saying, okay, I'm understanding. You're seeing everything you're doing right, okay, and you're probably finding some things you're like, I can tweak this and tweak that, and
I mean, I
edit
don't want to
this.
make it sound like I felt like I was doing everything right.
No,
There was plenty to tweak,
yeah, I think
plenty
all
to
of us
fully change also.
for sure. I think there's an element of that, and then there's the collaboration side as you meet
Mhm.
other people in your profession and you network and see how they're doing it, day to day, and they may align. You mentioned that you're with some designers that have been in business 10 years, and they kind of group you that way.
Yeah.
Um, how has that impacted you over your career, just networking with other fellow designers?
Oh my God. I mean, I don't know what I would do without them, honestly. And I don't know how it is in other markets. And I know, I'm from New York originally. I spent some time there during graduate school, and then working after school, and then moved to Austin, Texas after that. But so I don't know. I think there's different markets are more competitive or maybe a little less forgiving or giving. I find Austin's designer designer market to be extremely sharing, extremely open. So my designer network has been essential to my mental sanity and learning about the ins and outs of other people's businesses. I have a group of friends that I have an official peer group, and we haven't met in a little while, but we were meeting very regularly for a while, and a couple of us kind of have little offshoots, and we get together and talk. Um, Same with architects. There's a handful of architects that I like to talk to, and we share about business. And it's really the networking. I think in big industries, big when you're talking about big corporations, networking is very different. And in this world, it's all a bunch of small business owners just trying to figure out how to do this best, how to get through the day, how to get through the project, how to keep our clients happy, how to stay sane. And so I don't know if I would have survived if I didn't have that support system. Um, there have been times when I'm like, I don't know, I have a billing issue. I got a client's questioning an invoice. Can we get together? Can we talk invoice? Can you bring a copy of your invoices? And we, let me see what your Asana looks like. How's your project management software set up? What does your contract say? These are, and people share it, and it's amazing. And I'm getting the same from the design camp people that I met, the other campers. There's an Instagram group. It's great, and people are just open, and everyone wants to help everyone. We're not taking this competition standpoint. It's like if we all are elevating when we're elevating each other, and that's amazing. So, and I will say also, designers have been a great source of business. Not every project is right for me. Not every project is right. If I have a friend and we have different styles and different approaches and different personalities, um, a client may come to them. It's just not the right project. They refer me. It's great for me. So that's been wonderful also, and sort of an unexpected. I don't know why I didn't expect that, but I find that those have been some of my better projects also. Um, that's been kind of a nice bonus. But I think, those when people really are sharing your experience, it's so important to be able to talk to them about it.
Yeah, I love that. And, very similar to us, on the building side, there's some great peers I've met. And um, the passing of business is interesting because not everything's a fit, even here locally in Phoenix. I mean, not all builders are collaborative,
Yeah. Oh
there's
yeah.
no doubt, but there are some that are. And there's been some we've passed back and forth. And heck, it could be that you may have some clients too that you may be a little weary of, and other designers are looking at them and you can be like, hey, so there's a lot of collaboration that you know, they go back and forth and really help.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's you kind of touched on this a little bit that you have an MBA. How did that MBA how has that
Oh, I don't have
impacted?
an MBA.
Oh, you don't.
I have a Master of Science in Interior
Oh, Master of
Design.
Science. Okay,
Yes. If I had an
so
MBA, things might be totally different. I
yeah,
would
well
love to
played.
have an MBA. That's what I've learned in the last 10 years.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, the MBA that's probably one of um, those degrees that do help you definitely,
Yeah,
figure out the financial side of your business, no
for
doubt.
sure.
Um, but going back to the college part, I mean,
Mhm.
what do you think just being open, the benefit of college, how that's impacted your business? Do you feel that you could have been just as successful in design? I mean, missing that step. I know that you had a focus of interior design, so there's definitely some conceptual stuff that you're going to learn there. But your honest opinion about does a designer have to go to college?
It's a great question. So and I don't know if I don't have a straightforward answer for it. And I think it really depends on who you are and how you're starting out. So for me, I have a English degree first. I have a bachelor in English, and then I went back to school several years after graduating from college and got my master's, in design. And the program I went to Pratt Institute, which was very focused on, it's very technical and really we were groomed for working in large companies, the Genslers, the HOKs, that big companies doing big institutional design, and I knew I didn't want to do that. So then after graduating, there was a real I had to do a lot of self education on what is small residential interior design. We really focused a lot on interior architecture and in some ways architecture. And then we did some landscape project. I mean, we were doing all kinds of stuff that, had nothing to do with like building a home for somebody. So, but I found that to be incredibly important. First of all, it gave me a lot of insight into, all the different parts and pieces that come together. And it made me think outside the box. It made me consider, a 360 view of how projects come together, that this is not, and we're not just in a silo, we're working with other people. I mean, in school we were sort of designing it all ourselves, but I understood that that's not how the real world works.
Hmm.
But I think having that technical background and having the history and really understanding, having that full baseline of education, knowing to draw. I mean, that was huge for me.
Hmm.
Having come from a non-design background, I spent an extra year in graduate school learning to draw, just learning the language of design, which I felt was absolutely crucial, and I would never do it a different way. And I still draw. I mean, I'm one of the few people that I know that draws by hand to start. Um, I prefer it that way. I don't understand how anyone designs on a computer and can dream. So I feel like it really gave me that baseline of how do we sketch, and it's loose and you're not committed, whereas in CAD you're kind of stuck, and you get stuck on an idea and you just want to develop that one, where if you're working on trace paper, you flip and you flip it, you're on to the next thing. So um, as far as, does everyone need to go to school? I felt like I did, because I also don't come from I don't have the social network that would take me from knowing nothing to working on somebody's Park Avenue apartment, and that's how my career is launched. So I really my journey has been just working really hard and working my way up, working my way from tiny projects to slightly larger projects to a little bit larger projects, learning from architects, learning from builders, and building that network. So the way I get business is from mostly industry people, word of mouth from past clients, but that industry network is how I get business more than, I'm not, at school doing pickups. I don't have kids, so I'm not in the private school network. I don't have the Park Avenue friends. love my
Hmm.
friends. So I don't have that, so I have to come at it a different way. And I feel like my education was very important for that, but it also gave me a lot of grit. It gave me a lot of hustle. My school didn't have a ton of resources, so we really had to work hard and we had to be very resourceful, which you have to be in design. So ask a lot of questions, and I never take no for an answer. I mean, I'm from New York. This is how we are anyway, but it's, that really just compounded it. And I feel like that made me a stronger designer, having to kind of struggle through that. Um, but I do think, if you're going into residential design, there's a path for you to um, learn from other people and absorb it. If you're curious, if you're interested, um, if you can find somebody, designers are tough to work for. We don't have a lot of time to mentor and thoughtfully, guide and pat your head. And, I didn't get any of that. So I had to keep up and be ready at any moment, and be a sponge. And I think people who do that can be very successful if they're hungry and they're always learning. When I'm interviewing designers, I always want to know, like, where are they getting information? How are they bettering themselves? Like, what is their self education? What are they looking at? And, we've had people apply who they don't have an Instagram, they don't really care, they're not interested. And I'm like, how are you doing this? Are you not passionate about, like, if you don't love this, you can't do it because it's too hard.
Yeah.
So you have to be absorbing all this information at all times and never being able to turn it off. So, I mean, I don't, not everyone's going to be me. I get that, but there's got to be some underlying passion where you cannot shut it off to some extent. It doesn't mean you have to work 24 hours a day, but so I think if you're that kind of person, you can do just fine. You can learn the skills, or maybe you're great at delegating and you can figure out quickly that you need to hire a drafts person, or hire a project manager, and assemble a team.
No, it's really good advice because I do love the point you made about being passionate because it's way too hard of a
It's way too
career
hard.
path, right? And sometimes I think even when you're passionate about it, you're like, still, why did I choose this? It's still too hard.
Exactly. I wonder that all the time. Yeah. And then, but at the end of the day, there's absolutely nothing else I could do. I'm in it. This is it for life. Even if I think I want to give up sometimes, can't do it.
Hmm.
I don't know what I would do. Can't go work for somebody. So
Yeah, you can't.
yeah,
And you've put too much blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, there's too
absolutely.
much that's
Yeah.
gone
At
into
the
it.
end of the day, I
And
don't want to.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's a skill set. So going back and we kind of touched on the college aspect, which totally
Mhm.
makes sense. I mean, there's different strategies as you mentioned to alumni network, and putting you in a position where there's confidence, or maybe there's something on a piece of paper that feels puts you at a different qualification as you're kind of working your way through building your career. How did that experience in New York play a role? Just working in New York, and how has that impacted you now down in Austin?
Um, I think everyone should have the experience of living and trying to survive in New York.
Hmm.
I grew up there, so uh, but growing up there and then being an adult trying to make it in the design industry is a different world. And I will say, I say design specific because I finished graduate school um, months mere months before the economy tanked in 2008. So um, so it was a really terrible time to be getting into this creative field, this luxury service where people were really pulling back and really just launching a career during that tough time in a recession. So the experience of being in New York in general, I mean, I got laid off, then I had to find my way. I was hired by an architect I had been working with to help him run some of his side projects. I wound up working with him for 2 years. I mean, I just had to scrap it together. So I think New York is a place where you really have to work double hard, extra hard, because there are, they always say there's 1,000 people would take your place. And it's true. There is somebody that's just waiting for you to drop out. So um, I think that was an incredible learning ground. And then going to school there, having all the museums, having just walking down the street, it's dripping in history. I love preservation. I kind of discovered it there, as far as academically discovered it there, understanding what historic preservation was, and I'd always liked history and art history, but that really came to life with me from an architectural standpoint. So being there and being able to take walking tours, the design shows that are there. I mean, we just had so much access. So from a curiosity standpoint, from a exposure to art, culture, all different people, different styles. I can't think of a better place to be other than, like Paris, London, any of the other big cities. Of course, you can do all of this you don't have to be in New York. It doesn't have to be the epicenter of the world. But that was just, I think that was the best education place for education for me.
So having grown up there, and of course, working in New York, anyone that's been in New York, I've been there many times. We can all understand the hustle and bustle and the
Hmm.
competitive nature, and the constraints. And you mentioned the historical side, which there's challenges when you're doing historical
Yeah.
preservation and design and architecture. Um, eh, what are some of the challenges you deal with now in Austin? That's maybe in contrast to what you dealt with in New York.
It's interesting. I mean, I think right now we talked about this a little bit at Design Camp at dinner. We've had a sub problem,
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
skilled labor, and I
Skilled
think
labor.
and that's where we're. I know that there's lots of groups now that are organizations that are trying to get kids involved, kids that are not necessarily cut out for college, not interested in kind of a traditional path, get them into a trade and give them mentorship and guidance. And I think that's amazing because we're really, we've got our old guys. I've got the guys that I like will not let retire because they've got a bad knee, they've got a bad back, and like they've got to get off that ladder. But they also are the only person in town that knows how to do this one thing, and nobody is training under them. So I think we have a gap in some of that skilled labor where we're paying for people to learn on the job, and I think that's really hard to deal with. So we've got a lot of that here, um, just kind of untrained. With the kind of work that we're doing, also the expectations of our clients that are coming from other places. These are people that come from New York, they come from Europe, they come from um, California, but larger cities where you can kind of do anything. There's somebody that can execute
Hmm.
all of this stuff that has been doing it for decades, and then they we don't have that skill here. So
And
I think that's been tough.
it makes it tough on you as a designer. I mean, the builder, of
Yeah.
course, but for you, when you have these amazing designs and it can't be completed,
Yes.
I mean, I'd imagine it puts some strain on you from the creative side.
Yeah, we do a lot of redesigning to match the skill, which is, so how do we make this look, like we want it to, but also so they can build it in some way that we can all be proud of. That's tough. Or we find somebody else. I mean, then it becomes on us to find. All right, well, so we call this guy that works in Houston or Dallas. We're gonna have to have these cabinet doors made here because they know how to do it, or they know how to. This guy knows how to finish versus these guys that can't finish a piece of furniture. Furniture finishing is a whole
Mhm.
beast. So
It is.
yeah, yeah. So then we wind up overseeing a lot of those subcontractors or artisans, bringing them in through, sometimes we can run them through the GC, but sometimes we have to manage them ourselves, and um that adds a little layer of complication.
And as you're more seasoned in your business now, especially, I would imagine, when you first started, you're wearing all the hats, you're doing estimating, you're doing, you know, um, ordering and purchasing, and you're designing and you're drawing and everything else. How's that evolved now, to delegation to know where you should be focusing your time?
Yeah, I mean, that's been the big focus. It's still a struggle, kind of, outlining what are the things that I'm best at, that I'm good at, that I love doing. And so, can I put more of my energy into those things and then delegate the stuff that I really shouldn't be doing? So, I mean, I stopped doing billing. That was my first hire was a bookkeeper to do invoicing. I really shouldn't be around that. Nobody needs me sending putting together an invoice and sending it out. And so that was my first hire, was a bookkeeper to take that off my plate, and I've never looked back. Um, we've also, we've evolved the business. I reached a point a couple years ago where I felt like I'd reached I'd reached the limit of what I could do myself as the leader, as the only person have with all the ideas, between design ideas and business operational ideas, business development ideas, all of that. So I really needed a partner, and so I need kind of like a right hand, a managing director, somebody to that knew. I used to say I needed a clone of myself, and I learned that I don't need another me. I'm fine. I'm enough, and I need somebody with totally different skill sets. And I think that's the key, is really, who are these different people that have completely different skill sets than I do, that can better the business because they're bringing their expertise to the table. So actually, my husband left his firm. He had run was a founder of a digital design agency, and they had started off as five guys in an apartment, and they grew to 100 people, and
Wow.
he had kind of the scope and direction had changed, and so he wound up um, exiting that business, and he was helping me work through some problems anyway. He was listening to me complain at home, so he just started helping, and then we decided to make that official. So he joined the firm last year, um, and he's the managing director. So when we need this operationally, or this isn't working for me, he it goes on his list, and he works with me on business development. We come up with ideas for marketing. So it's been that's been a game changer to have this second person that is also an expert um, in his own right. It's also helpful that he has a design background, so he understands this creative process that
Mhm.
we have to schedule, and we need to leave time for creativity, which I think is really hard for operations focused people when it's real linear thinkers, and design is not linear. So he's been great about leaving space for us, to design and create, and giving us the time we need. But then we have a schedule. We still are running a business. We can't just let this go on forever. So we need to have deadlines. We need to set expectations. We need to follow through and meet the goals and meet the expectations. But from the business standpoint, it's been great. Utilization, projections, all of that stuff that I'm just not great at. My brain doesn't work that way, and it's just there's not enough time in the day for me to do all of those things. So procurement, we have our operations coordinator who handles that, um, which is a huge job, handling
Mhm.
all the invoicing and then ordering, tracking all these things that are or are not coming in, or came in damaged and need to be replaced and need to be fixed. So it's been wonderful to assemble a team that really takes that stuff off of my plate, so I can focus more on you know working directly with our clients, designing, drawing, thinking, coming up with these grand ideas that we then implement. So that's been really helpful.
How's that dynamic been? Has it added any strain? Has it been tough, working with your husband on a day-to-day basis in the business and outside?
Um, we should probably ask the people in the office. No, it's been good. We kind of set some ground rules early on. We also, we'd been through a renovation together, so we kind of understood
Yeah.
that dynamic. We made it through that, on a personal level. But I think it helps that we're not designing all day together. He's
Mhm.
not like my partner in design. He's
Yeah.
the partner in the business. So, but we do have to shut it off, and we're both passionate people. We both love to talk about business. We love to talk about how we can improve. So we have to, at night we have to cut it off. Like, no more. It's the last thing we're going to say about work today. And weekends we have to make sure that we're not just constantly talking
Mhm.
about business. So from a relationship standpoint, we want to keep that whole. And we do different days. I was always working in the office 5 days a week. He works now from home Wednesdays. I work from home on Fridays. So we have a little bit of separation time. So we've created some space and ground rules, and just trying to prioritize, make sure that our marriage is whole and the business can stay whole, because
Yeah.
it's important.
It's super important. It's
Yeah.
tricky too. I mean, it's a lot of balance. I mean, when you
Yeah.
think about work-life balance, you're doing it on all fronts. So
Right. Yeah, definitely.
it's amazing. So what's the best advice you've been given?
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, there's always that like cheesy, you trusting your gut. I mean, I feel like that's like everyone says that, but I think I've been burned so many times by ignoring my gut, and it's a lesson I have to keep learning over and over again. So, and I think that what goes with that is recognizing when something isn't working, and make an exit plan fast. Just whether that's a client that's just it's not a good fit, an employee not a good fit, a process that's just not going well. I'm a like make it worker kind of person, and
Mhm.
it's not worth it sometimes. So learning to kind of cut it off and say this is just we gotta move on. Um, and I think just you can't do it all alone. Um,
Mhm.
you really you need people, whether it's an actual partner in your business, or a partner in your life, or your friends, a system, a therapist, whatever it is. Your network. You really can't do this alone.
Yeah, I love that. There is some truth to that, whether it's a friend, a therapist. I mean, it's you got to have
A
something that's,
coach, somebody, yeah,
coach,
anybody.
living life as an entrepreneur, it's lonely, and
Yeah,
and there's ups and downs, and it's tough, and you're fighting a lot of battles that you probably didn't realize when you're working for someone. And
right.
it's, and to that point where it's like leads into like, what do you do for fun? I mean, you you're involved in your business. It's harder to turn it off. So when
Yeah.
you are able to turn it off, what do you do?
Well, I would say, some of it always some of it comes back to business. I love going to see, go a new restaurant,
Hmm.
a cocktail bar, a lounge space. Just, how are other people designing things? What is this experience that people are creating?
Hmm.
But that rolls into travel and just getting out and seeing new cultures and you know, other aesthetics and learning history. So, and then from when it's like has nothing to do with work, really just overall wellness of body and mind. So I do a lot of yoga, strength training, trying to age gracefully.
I like that.
I'm gonna keep doing this for a long time, so I gotta be like, I gotta be healthy. So
Hmm.
I'm a former recovering theater kid. So music, theater, all of that stuff, which is reflected in our, I think, in our work. We have a kind of dramatic um, bent in our work, so that comes in, and then of course involvement in the community. So there's a couple of organizations that are close to my heart. So just trying to keep it all. Some of it's related to work, some of work adjacent, and some of it has nothing to do. It's just personal hobbies.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, Killy, it's been incredible, and I really appreciate making time. I know you have a busy schedule, so thanks for joining us today and coming on. And for those listening, where can they find you?
Our website is scheer.co. That's scheer.co. There's no M on the end of that. And Instagram, we're at Scheer and Co.
Amazing. Well, we'll make sure to have that tagged and everyone reach out and um, doing some great things. So definitely go
Great.
follow Killy. She has some really good content. So
Thank you so much. This has been great.
if you get value from the show, please support us by giving a 5-star rating and review on whatever platform you listen to. And I also have a favor to ask. We've had some incredible guests that come on and share their wisdom, their knowledge about their business. So if you have friends or family members that could benefit from those episodes, please share it with them, as well as any other business owners that you're networking with that could get value from the podcast or certain episodes. Please share those as well. Again, subscribe, make sure you're following. Any questions that you have, topics. We've had listeners reach out about certain guests that we should have on the show. Again, brad.l@aftconstruction.com. Email me for topics to address, guests that we should have on, and even if you think you'd be a great guest for the show. So again, thank you for all your support, and we'll see you next time.